It was a rainy Friday night in Lagos, and the traffic on the third mainland bridge was moving very slowly because of a broken truck. Sarah decided to come down from the yellow commercial bus at the Shoki bus stop because she was tired of sitting in the heat for 3 hours. As she walked near the edge of the lagoon where the fishermen usually kept their wooden boats, she saw something strange in the shadows. An old woman was standing too close to the dark water, and she looked as if she was about to fall into the deep, dirty river. Sarah ran towards the woman quickly because she was afraid the wind would push the frail body into the water. When Sarah grabbed the woman's arm, the old lady turned around with eyes that looked like they had seen the beginning of the world. The woman was shivering from the cold rain, so Sarah took off her scarf and wrapped it around the woman's shaking shoulders to make her warm. Instead of saying thank you, the old woman reached into her bag and pulled out a silver chain that looked very dull and old. She pressed the chain into Sarah's palm and closed Sarah's fingers over it tight. The woman looked deep into Sarah's eyes and said, "This is for your kind heart, but you must never use it for greed or to fight what God has written." Sarah laughed nervously because she thought the woman was just confused from the cold weather. Before Sarah could ask her name or where she lived, a loud thunder clapped in the sky, causing Sarah to blink and look away for just 1 second. When she looked back, the old woman was gone, leaving only footprints in the mud and a warm chain in Sarah's hand. Sarah went home to her small apartment in Yaba, thinking that the old woman was just a ghost or a spirit of the lagoon. She tossed the chain on her table and went to check on her younger brother, Sam, who had been sick with a terrible fever for 3 days. The doctors at the general hospital said it was a rare infection and the medicine they gave him was not working at all. Sam was burning up with heat and he was breathing very heavily as if he was running a long race. Sarah felt helpless and sad as she sat by his bed, holding his hand and praying for a miracle to happen. Suddenly, she remembered the strange warmth of the chain she had received earlier that evening. Without really believing it would work, she walked to the table, picked up the silver chain, and placed it gently around Sam's neck. As soon as the metal touched his skin, a soft white light filled the dark room, making the shadows run away. Sarah gasped in shock because the light was not coming from the bulb, but it was coming from the chain itself. Within 2 minutes, Sam stopped shaking, his breathing became calm, and he opened his eyes as if he had just woken up from a good sleep. He looked at Sarah and asked for food, completely healed from the sickness that was supposed to kill him. Sarah touched the chain, which was now vibrating with a strange energy, and she realized that her life had changed forever. For the first few months, Sarah tried to keep the power of the chain a secret because she did not want unnecessary attention from the neighbors. However, it is very hard to keep secrets in a Nigerian compound where everyone lives close together and shares the same kitchen and bathroom. One afternoon, Mama Nkechi, the neighbor who lived in the room opposite Sarah, fell down the stairs and broke her leg very badly. The bone was sticking out and everyone in the compound was screaming and panicking because there was no car to take her to the hospital. Sarah could not stand by and watch her neighbor suffer in pain, so she ran into her room and brought out the chain. She told everyone to step back, and she wrapped the chain around Mama Nkechi's swollen leg while whispering a quiet prayer. The neighbors stopped screaming and watched in silence as the bone moved back into place and the skin closed up without a single scar. Mama Nkechi stood up immediately, dancing and praising God while looking at Sarah with a mixture of happiness and fear. By the next morning, the story of the miracle girl had spread through the streets of Yaba and Surulere like a Harmattan fire. People started gathering in front of her gate, carrying their sick children and elderly parents, begging for just one touch of the chain. Some people called her a saint sent from heaven, while others whispered that she was using dark magic from the village. Sarah felt the weight of the responsibility, but she remembered the old woman's warning about greed, so she never asked for money. As the years passed, Sarah saved many lives, from children with asthma to men who had been involved in terrible motorcycle accidents. The chain became a constant companion, and she wore it hidden under her blouse so that people would not try to steal it. However, having such power made Sarah very lonely because she felt that nobody truly knew her. They only knew what she could do for them. She stopped going to parties or hanging out with friends because she was always afraid that an emergency would happen. One day, while she was buying vegetables at the chaotic Oyinbo market, she met a man named David who helped her pick up her bag when it tore. David was a teacher at a secondary school, and he had a very kind smile that made Sarah feel calm for the first time in years. He did not know who she was, and he did not look at her like she was a magical object or witch. They stood there talking about the high price of tomatoes and the bad traffic in Lagos for almost 30 minutes. Sarah felt a spark in her heart that was different from the warmth of the chain, and she realized she wanted to know him better. She agreed to meet him for lunch the next day, but she promised herself that she would never tell him about the chain. She wanted something real, something that had nothing to do with miracles or sickness or death. But as she walked home, the chain felt heavy around her neck, as if it was reminding her that she could never truly be normal. Sarah and David fell in love deeply, and for 2 years their relationship was the best thing in her life. David was patient and understanding, even when Sarah had to run off in the middle of a date to help a neighbor who was in trouble. But the secrets were building a wall between them, because David could not understand why strange people were always coming to Sarah's house at night. One evening, after a romantic dinner at a restaurant in Acacia, David asked her seriously if she was involved in something illegal or dangerous. Sarah realized that if she wanted to keep him, she had to tell him the truth, even if he thought she was crazy. They went back to her apartment, and she showed him the chain and explained everything about the old woman by the lagoon. David did not believe her at first, thinking it was just a story, until Sarah cut her own finger with a knife and hid it instantly with the chain. David stared at her hand in shock, his mouth open, unable to speak for a long time. He did not run away as she feared, but he held her hands and told her that he was worried about the burden she was carrying. He made a promise that she would be careful because power like that attracts dangerous people who might want to hurt her. David accepted her for who she was, and Sarah felt that she had finally found the partner she was destined to be with. They started planning their future together, talking about marriage and moving to a quiet house on the outskirts of Lagos. To celebrate their 3rd anniversary, David surprised Sarah with tickets for a private boat cruise along the coast of Lagos. He wanted them to have a quiet evening away from the noise of the city, just the two of them and the ocean breeze. Sarah was excited because she rarely left the mainland, and the idea of watching the sunset from the water sounded perfect. She wore her best blue dress, and David wore a crisp white shirt that made him look very handsome. As they boarded the boat at the jetty in Victoria Island, the sky was clear and painted with beautiful colors of orange and pink. The captain of the boat was a cheerful man who played soft high-life music as they sailed away from the shore. Sarah felt the chain resting warmly against her chest, and for the first time, she felt that life was perfect. She whispered to the chain, thanking it for bringing her to this point where she could be happy and loved. They ate dinner on the deck, laughing and talking about the names they would give their future children. David held her hand and looked into her eyes, telling her that he loved her more than anything in the world. But as the night grew darker, the wind started to pick up speed, and the waves began to slap against the side of the boat, harder than before. Sarah looked at the horizon and saw dark clouds gathering quickly, hiding the moon and the stars. The storm came upon them with a violence that nobody expected, turning the calm ocean into a raging monster. The boat was tossed up and down like a toy in a bathtub, and plates and glasses smashed onto the floor. The captain tried to steer the boat back towards the shore, but the engine made a loud coughing sound and died completely. Rain poured down heavily, soaking Sarah and David within seconds as they held onto the railing for their lives. Water started rushing into the boat, and the sound of the wind was so loud that they had to scream to hear each other. David grabbed 2 life jackets from under the seat and struggled to put one on Sarah while the boat tilted dangerously to the left. Suddenly, a massive wave hit the side of the boat, causing a heavy metal pole to break loose from the roof. Sarah screamed a warning, but it was too late to dodge the falling metal. The pole struck David on the head with a sickening sound, and he crumpled to the wet floor immediately. Sarah crawled towards him, ignoring the water that was rising around her waist. Blood was flowing from his head and his eyes were closed, but he was still breathing faintly. The boat groaned and tipped over completely, throwing both of them into the freezing, dark Atlantic Ocean. Sarah managed to grab hold of a large piece of wood floating in the water and pull David's unconscious body onto it. The waves were crashing over them and the salt water stung her eyes, but she focused only on David. She could feel his life fading away, his skin becoming cold despite the tropical heat of the night. With shaking hands, she reached for the chain around her neck, knowing that it had never failed her before. "Please, wake up," she screamed against the roaring wind, pressing the chain against David's forehead. She waited for the familiar white light, the warmth, the vibration that signaled a miracle was happening. But for the first time, the chain remained cold, lifeless, and dark like a piece of ordinary metal. She screamed again, louder this time, begging the chain to save the man she loved more than her own life. She tried again and again, rubbing the chain frantically against his chest, his arms, and his face. "I command you to work," she yelled, her tears mixing with the rain and the ocean spray. But the chain did not respond, and David's chest stopped moving as his heart gave its final beat. Sarah held him tight, wailing into the darkness, unable to understand why the miracle had abandoned her when she needed it the most. Sarah was rescued by a fisherman's boat the next morning, still holding on to David's body, but she did not speak a single word. The funeral was held a week later in a quiet cemetery in Yaba, and many people came to pay their respects. They whispered among themselves, wondering why the miracle girl could not save her own fiancé when she had saved so many strangers. Sarah heard their whispers, and they cut her heart deeper than any knife could. She took the chain off her neck and threw it into the back of a dark drawer in her bedroom, vowing never to touch it again. She locked herself in her apartment, refusing to open the door for anyone, even for her brother Sam. The pain of losing David was mixed with a burning anger towards the chain, and the old woman who gave it to her. She felt betrayed, believing that the gift was actually a curse designed to give her hope and then destroy her. Months passed, and Sarah became a shadow of herself, losing weight and looking older than her age. Sick people still came to her gate, knocking and begging for help, but she shouted at them to go away. She told them that the magic was gone, that there were no miracles left in the world. Sarah lived in darkness, punishing herself for surviving, while David had died. 2 years later, Sarah was sitting on her balcony, watching the dusty street below, without any interest. A car parked in front of her gate, and a man in a wheelchair came out, assisted by a driver. The man looked familiar, but Sarah could not remember where she had seen him before. He insisted on seeing her, shouting from the gate that he had a message about the night of the storm. Curiosity made Sarah go down to open the gate. Although she told him she had nothing to give him, the man introduced himself as Mr. Benson, and he told her that he was also on a boat that night, a smaller boat that had capsized nearby. He told Sarah that he had seen everything that happened before the storm got too bad. He said, "Your man David, he saw my boat sinking before yours got hit." Sarah listened in confusion as Mr. Benson explained that David had left the safety of the cabin to throw a rope and life jackets to Mr. Benson's family in the water. "He stayed out on the deck to make sure my children caught the rope," Mr. Benson said with tears in his eyes. If he had stayed inside the cabin, the metal pole would not have hit him. Sarah felt a shock go through her body as she realized David had died because he was trying to save others. Sarah could not sleep that night because Mr. Benson's words kept playing in her mind like a broken record. She realized that she had to find the old woman again to understand why the chain did not hit David. The next morning, she went back to the exact spot by the lagoon where they had met many years ago. The place looked the same, with the fishermen mending their nets and the smell of smoked fish in the air. She stood there for hours, waiting and praying, until she felt a familiar hand on her shoulder. The old woman was there, looking exactly the same as she did on that first night. "Why?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "Why did it fail him?" The old woman looked at Sarah with sad but wise eyes. "The chain did not fail," the woman said softly. "It is a guardian of life, but it cannot reverse a sacrifice made for destiny." She explained that David's death was the price paid for the lives of Mr. Benson's 3 children, who were destined to do great things in the future. If the chain had brought David back, the timeline of fate would have been broken, and many others would have suffered. Sarah fell to her knees and cried, not out of anger this time, but out of understanding and grief. Knowing the truth gave Sarah a sense of peace that she had not felt since the accident. She realized that David died a hero, and the chain had respected his sacrifice by not interfering. She went home and opened the drawer, taking out the chain which was covered in dust. It felt warm again, humming with a gentle energy as if it was welcoming her back. Sarah started to go out again, slowly reconnecting with her neighbors and her brother Sam. She did not use the chain immediately, but she started volunteering at a local orphanage, helping children with her own hands and heart. One day, she met a man named Michael at the orphanage, a quiet man who fixed toys for the children. He was different from David. He was not as outgoing, but he had a gentle spirit that Sarah found comforting. They became friends first, taking long walks and talking about simple things like food and books. Sarah was afraid to love again, but Michael was patient and did not push her. He knew about her past and respected her grief. Slowly, Sarah allowed herself to smile again, realizing that her heart was large enough to hold the memory of David and still make room for Michael. 5 years after the storm, Sarah was a different woman, stronger, wiser, and happy once again. She was sitting in her garden with Michael, watching the sunset, when a neighbor ran in with a child who had swallowed a coin and was choking. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed the chain and placed it on the child's throat. The child coughed, the coin flew out, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. But as the child smiled, Sarah felt a sharp snap around her neck. She looked down and saw that the silver chain had broken into 2 pieces and fallen into her lap. The metal was no longer warm, it was just ordinary silver, cold and silent. She looked at it and waited for the panic to set in, but instead she felt a wave of freedom wash over her. She realized that the chain's work was done. It had taught her that the greatest power was not magic, but love and sacrifice. She did not need the chain to be special or to help people anymore. Sarah picked up the broken pieces, smiled at Michael, and buried the chain in the soil of her garden. She took Michael's hand, ready to live the rest of her life as an ordinary woman with an extraordinary heart.